So Andrew and I were grabbing dinner earlier this evening, and while we were sitting down, he was telling me basically his theory on this, which I so agree once you went through it. Basically the title of this video.
I'm going to try to explain to you guys why Comfortably Numb, and explicitly the solo at the end of Comfortably Numb is just the end of Pink Floyd and what Pink Floyd was. So everything after that is really just a forced encore.
Yeah.
Even side 4 of The Wall, The Show Must Go On, everything past that is a forced encore, leading up to the final cut, which is basically kind of just a slap in the face to the band, and honestly, like, all the fans of Pink Floyd, as it really just didn't hold up to what Pink Floyd was all about from the very beginning. So it all kind of starts with here, Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Now, they had several kind of psychedelic pop singles before this that led them up to here, but this is where they really started their kind of psychedelic deep dive, and it felt like they were trying to achieve something. This is kind of the first main era of Pink Floyd, and that era, for me, and I think just in general, ends at Echoes.
And that was mostly Syd Barrett was like the main creative force, right?
Yeah, for this record in particular. He left after Piper at the Gates of Dawn. He had one song in Sauce Full of Secrets, Jug Band Blues, which is kind of like a type of like homage / a goodbye.
Yeah.
This is the first album where they had, where David Gilmour officially kind of stepped in. And just kind of random side note, David Gilmour is actually kind of the guitarist who taught Sid guitar, and just everything he knew kind of at that point in time. They were very good friends. He was always close with the guys in Pink Floyd. So everything they're doing here really leads and ends up at Echoes in the Metal album. Pretty much every album in this first era, the kind of their psychedelic dive, they were attempting to create some type of magnum opus of sorts. In Piper at the Gates of Dawn, they had Interstellar Overdrive, and in this record, they had Sauce Full of Secrets. This one, they had Atom Heart Mother, the title track. And then you kind of come up to here where they have Echoes. And this is the first time everything really came together, and it might be my favorite Pink Floyd song of all time.
Really?
Echoes. Because it feels like they really finished and captured everything they were trying to do up to this point. And then once they did it, they were like, okay, we're good. Now we can go on and drop one of the best albums of all time.
And
Dark Side of the
Obscured
Moon.
by Clouds, I think you've talked to me about this before, but that was just like a movie track thing, right?
Yeah, so Pink Floyd, they have the More album, and they have Obscured by Clouds, which are movie soundtracks. There are some good songs in each of them, and Obscured by Clouds in particular, you kind of get your first real taste at David Gilmour's like nasty guitar tone, stuff that is reminiscent through this run. So at this point, after Echoes, that's when you really have Pink Floyd's run.
Yeah, that's a crazy run.
Yeah, so Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. And that leads us into basically one of the best album runs of any band of all time.
Really
You have
good.
Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Animals, and The Wall. The band, they were firing on all cylinders, all working together up until kind of right around here. Animals into The Wall is when things started to get weird. Richard Wright didn't have a lot of contribution to Animals. Wish You Were Here is really the last album where he was a full game player. He started kind of phasing out around here until it got to the point where he was actually fired in the sessions of The Wall.
What was that about, do you know?
It really was. Richard Wright was kind of just... his heart wasn't in it the way it was, and part of that came from maybe creative differences, but a lot of it really comes back to kind of Roger's tyrannical nature and just controlling nature of Pink Floyd, the sound, the songwriting, and what Pink Floyd was coming out with.
But The Wall itself.
The Wall itself, so you look into it, it's a double LP, and so you look at it, and in my opinion, it ends right here. Comfortably Numb, the solo, the last little notes. It ends right here. At the end of the guitar solo, it fades out, and then it goes into side 4, The Show Must Go On. Now, at this point, everything past Comfortably Numb, everything past that solo is now a forced encore. The first lines in The Show Must Go On is, must the show go on?
Yeah.
Almost in like really like a sad way. It's like, must I continue? Do I have to keep doing this? And it's like why? Must the show go on? Where has the feeling gone? Will I remember the song? It's very melancholy, sad, and the atmosphere built under the lyrics are almost like uplifting, but just melancholy, sad, and
Like you're doing this forcefully. I'm having to do this. This isn't what I enjoy anymore.
Exactly. And it even feels like the songs, even the writing of it feels,
Forced.
Exactly. And it feels like not like Pink Floyd anymore. And there's an artistic bit about it, so it's fine here. Like all of this is fine. It's artistic expression of just the music industry and how it's always going. You're at the album, now you got to tour the album, now you got to drop another album.
Yeah.
It's a continuous process, and it's just about that feeling, and it's the perfect stopping place, especially if the band is already in turmoil. If
you're Richard Wright, who's now fired from the band, like hired on like for money, for pay, basically, like, but you're not a member. It's very clear. And while this is going on, wasn't Roger writing the next album?
He was writing the next album, and that's the final cut, and it's essentially a solo album, and seriously, kind of, in my opinion, a smack in the face and borderline an assault on Pink Floyd and everything Pink Floyd ever stood for. And it really just comes across like Roger Waters wanted to have the last word.
Yeah.
Because everything is already said and done. It's wrapped up with arguably one of the top 10 albums of all time, The Wall. Just easily one of the best concept albums to ever exist. Some people, it's their favorite concept album of all time. And it's like, Rogers had to keep going. In The Wall, it really skims that thin line of kind of like political motifs, but it's not going into anything too specific. Whereas the final cut, Roger Waters at this point brought a lot of modern political beliefs that he shared into the album, almost in a way where he wants to sway the listeners of the album to lean one way or another. And he's just going way too deep, way too personal, and it wasn't representative of any at all of the other band members in the group.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think you told me David was just like, that was his big thing. He was like, the songs were fine, like I didn't have an issue with it, but
not even that. He felt the songs were underwhelming, and
really?
Then Roger would accuse him of, well, you're not bringing any material to this record. But it's like, dude, you already wrote the entire album. It wasn't a team process. It's like, we're not a band anymore.
What songs from the final cut were supposed to be on The Wall?
So I mean, none of them,
well,
thank God.
Yeah.
But there were a couple that Roger would have preferred for them to have been on the album. I think the main one that comes to mind is When the Tigers Broke Free.
Yeah.
And when we watched this on Patreon, this is in the Wall movie.
Yeah.
So that was kind of in Roger's head. This is a continuation of that. But
it almost feels like a personal continuation versus like the band continuation, which goes back to the solo album.
Exactly, and that's why it should have been a solo project. He should have just kept it to himself, continued it, because that's fine. You're not at that point tarnishing, the brand and just, Pink Floyd, everything that has been built up to this point.
Yeah.
And at this point, so he goes, and it's even titled The Final Cut. So just with that album title, he's like, okay, I'm calling it quits. It's like when I say it's over, it's over.
And almost like everybody else is cut out, this is my show to end.
Exactly. And it's really just ending it on what really is ending it on a bad note. It's he wanted to have the last word and just ending on a bad note. And then he goes, all right, I quit. It's over. And then when the other three members, David, Nick, and Richard, they're like, wait, we're not done. Like, this is our life's work. Like, ultimately, they are very passionate about, they were always very passionate about Pink Floyd. It's just Roger kind of lost sight of what it was all about. And, that's just the music. It was always about the music. It was always about, just kind of serving something bigger than yourself. And, if you asked Roger, he would say, I was doing that with this album.
Okay, so Andy had to grab a blanket because it's literally 30 degrees in here and we don't have a heater. So the studio is very cold. So point being, the difference in The Wall and the final cut is staggering.
Substantial difference.
One of the greatest albums of all time, and then one where you said it was probably your least favorite album in their entire discography. So literally as far apart in Pink Floyd as you possibly can be.
And so this era of Pink Floyd, this is the kind of the third era. So the first era, all the psychedelic stuff. Then you have like The Run, which ends with the final cut. I mean, in my head, it ends with The Wall, and the final cut isn't even in any era.
Yeah,
it's actually kind of like just in between the eras. Really, in my head, like there's no way it's getting included in The Run. Zero. Not even as like a shitty ending. It's just It's right in between them. And this next era, only 2 albums, but it's kind of where David saves the face in his own way. Moment to Lapse of Reason, it's not their best album by any stretch. I don't think it's better than any of the records in the main run, but it really is a breath of fresh air. Learning to Fly, Breath of Fresh Air, Dogs of War. It's like a really awesome, like nasty tune where you get a lot of gritty, vocals from David, a lot of great writing. And this is, where you really see, at this point, the maturity and the experience and creativity that David has gained, but never really got a chance to kind of unleash in terms of songwriting.
Yeah.
Then you have Time Go By. They do Delicate Sound of Thunder, which is an amazing live record. I haven't heard all of it, but I've heard a couple cuts from it, and it's just great stuff. And then you have Division Bell. And at this point, this is essentially just an extremely mature close to Pink Floyd. This is David basically wrapping up Pink Floyd again, essentially.
Yeah,
and
I never thought of the forced encore the way that you proposed it, which is like really a forceful, like having to go back on stage, having to do more.
Yep.
It's like the band should have ended and wanted to end with the solo to Comfortably Numb.
Maybe not Roger, but
Yeah, well, should have ended there. That is the pinnacle moment in their probably entire discography, is like that one song specifically, and then also the solo. Like that's probably their most famous solo of all time.
100%. And for a lot of classic rock enthusiasts, might be their favorite solo in general.
It's true.
At least it's in like, people go like, oh, it's like Stairway to Heaven, Comfortably Numb, a couple just various solos of that. But it's up there in those conversations.
Yeah, and it also just feels like everything is working in the perfect way. So like the drums and that are iconic. The keyboard, like the way it sets the tone is iconic. This is an album that Roger was so heavily writing, so he got his voice heard, and he made this great picture. And you have David with the most iconic guitar solo potentially of all time.
Yeah, and
it's a perfect moment.
Yep, and The Wall is also just the pinnacle of Roger's writing, and everything he was doing, led up to that point. You have the Animals album, where that's kind of, honestly, it kind of goes back to Wish You Were Here, Welcome to the Machine, and Have a Cigar. They're kind of starting to really touch on, record companies and just overarching powers and influences.
Yeah.
Then they go into Animals, which it's a very broad, kind of like political take on what humans have, experienced for a long time, but it's not talking about anything specific. So it's a very, you see the natural progression of how you ended up on the final cut, but it's
more of a personal take as the final cut versus the band's take.
Yeah, exactly.
And so coming back to Division Bell, where you ended it, what's the ending of this, the last song there?
So the last song here is High Hopes, and it ends with honestly a beautiful solo from David Gilmour. It's a slide guitar solo, and a lot of the note choices is in the similar range. And if you really like listen to it in a way, it feels like he's almost playing the same thing over and over. But when you're actually listening, he's taking you on like a melodic journey, and none of it feels like reused. It all feels very fresh, and really it feels like closure almost to Pink Floyd and everything that led up to this point. Because it's like, in David's perspective, I don't know what he was thinking, but Comfortably Numb, that's like, I'm like signing off, like, that's it kind of thing. Band's breaking up, and this High Hopes, the solo to that, even though I'm sure he wouldn't say it's one of his favorite solos or one of his best solos, but it's just perfect enough, not trying too hard to, because he already did it. He did it in Comfortably Numb. He doesn't have to repeat himself.
Didn't need to prove it again.
He just needed to give closure kind of to the fans. I don't know if he knew he was doing that, but he really, really was. And it's cool how he had the album, Momentary Lapse of Reason between this. It's like, it's cool how he didn't rush like the ending.
Yeah.
And this whole album's really good. I'm not a huge fan of it's also a double LP. I'm not a huge fan of side 1, but Marooned On, I love every single song for different reasons. Even A Great Day for Freedom is kind of like, a callback or homage to The Wall. It's like the first line is like oh, like the day the wall came down, and it's kind of like uplifting, triumphant, melancholy, all these things. You have Take It Back, Coming Back to Life, which these are extremely like uplifting, empowering songs.
Yeah.
You have Keep Talking, which really that song is just saying how important it is, no matter your differences with people. It could be family members, friends, like, countries having issues with
bandmates.
It's like, keep talking, keep having conversations. It's like, it feels like Roger was always satisfied leaving things on a bad note.
Yeah.
Almost like he got some kind of satisfaction having control and just being able to say, like, being able to leave on a bad note and,
end it.
Exactly. And so you have all these uplifting, empowering songs. Lost for Words is almost a song where it's saying, like, I'd be willing to rebuild something, but it's like, I'm literally lost for words. Like, there's not much to say. But it's like you still have hope, but like, do the people who you wish to rebuild with, are they even interested in rebuilding with you?
Yeah.
And it sucks because in his situation, the answer is no. Like, no one's wanting to rebuild anything.
Yeah.
And then you have High Hopes, which is just a super mature song. They they played it kind of safe in terms of how they went about it, but that's not a bad thing. They just really gave you a really proper end in terms of studio work.
There definitely seems to be, like, I imagine almost two timelines. Like, imagine a timeline of like slightly better communication or less interpersonal drama between band members, and having The Wall end. It's like, okay, that's the end of a great career. I feel like you have so many bands, and this is like a majority of bands, that end up running their course way farther than they should.
Yeah.
I mean, the only band that comes to mind that didn't do that is the Beatles, where they're like on this run of albums, smack, another, and it's like right when you, like with Abbey Road, like, and I know there's some stuff after that.
I think there's the Let It Be is the last one, which we haven't heard that one.
Yeah, but I don't know the full story. From my understanding, I could be totally wrong. Let It Be was almost like not planned, or it was supposed to be.
They also
extra
wrote
stuff.
it kind of at the same time as Abbey Road.
Yeah.
So a lot of it was together.
Either way, even if you want to include that in that framework, whether it's Let It Be or Abbey Road, both of them are perfect endings, and everybody wanted more. And now the bandmates went on to do their own things. Each one of them had their own success, and that's perfect. But like as a collective, that's the only one I can think of where, in pretty much like the precipice, the peak of what they were doing, they just stopped.
Yeah, and it's like, when I say Comfortably Numb, the soul is like the end of Pink Floyd. I'm not saying that side 4 shouldn't have been there. It 100% should have. It's part of the concept, because the end of The Wall loops back into the beginning of The Wall. So all that is an artistic concept masterpiece.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the end. When you ask me, either like who contributed more or who was more of a part of the success of the run, there's no right answer. I don't think either Roger or David could have pulled off this run, without each other. It had to have been both of them.
Yeah.
That was the only way. Now, if you ask me in terms of post-Floyd, let's say things were different and, David had killed the band and Roger and the other two, and Nick and Richard picked up the reins and finished off. I don't think Roger would have been prepared or mature enough to have wrapped it up the way David did. David came, gave people breath of fresh air, and then wrapped it up clean. And then, boom, you have freaking Pulse live, one of the best live records of all time. And I don't think Roger would have been able to have done that. And really, this is not like, just a big, digging at Roger thing. In the end, in terms of, Pink Floyd fanboys, you do kind of have like David guys and Roger guys. That's a thing. But the truth is, I love both of them to death. I just wish Roger would have, I don't know, had more respect and had maybe put more effort into the relationships and really just the communication skills maybe needed. I don't know, and just worked with everybody involved. Now, in the end, I guess it's cool it worked out how it did, because you do have some great stuff on Division Bell and Momentary Lapse of Reason. But like you said, it's just kind of like cleaning up a mess that didn't really need to be cleaned up. It's almost like you have like, like imagine it's like the best shows of all time. Like, and the season finale is like, arguably one of the best season finales of all TV ever. And then the producer's like, I want one more season. And he wrote it all by himself. And, and let's say there were a couple, producers who were writing the show together. And then, and then one of them just took the reins and did it all himself. And then kind of just
almost like ruined
the ending.
Yeah.
Almost a little bit. I get the human desire to want to have the last word. But honestly, I just think the last word should have been The Wall.